Okay, we're going to get started because it is a few minutes after the top of the hour, and we want to thank everybody who is participating for joining us. This webinar roundtable is being organized by the Association for Budgeting and Financial Management, and is designed to provide an opportunity for us to discuss online instruction and the challenges and approaches that faculty are moving forward. To begin with, I do want to note that for those who are attending live on this webinar, please remain in mute mode unless you are otherwise instructed. We want to make sure to try to keep the background noise down as possible. And also just to note that this session is being recorded and will be available for replay at abfm.org as well as on the ABFM website. I am your host and presenter, Kenneth Hunter. So what I want to do to start off is just kind of go over some tips that were made possible in a recent article from Harvard on teaching online. And it's very simple. There's 8 tips total, half to do with preparation and the other half to do with instruction. And I just kind of want to go over those, and then we'll get into the crux of the opportunity for people to ask questions during this discussion. Number one, one of the keys obviously in preparation is to learn about your online teaching tool beforehand. Obviously, a lot of you are using Zoom, which of course this presentation is being made in. Whether it's Zoom or another product out there that you're using, make sure that you've had an opportunity to actually use the tool and familiarize yourself with all the various features and profiles that you have before you move forward with it. Second is making sure that your environment looks professional and inviting. Obviously, trying to minimize background. Obviously, if you're on camera, minimizing what happens in the background, making sure that you are, of course, professionally dressed or dressed similar to how you would be normally when you're giving a presentation or lecture before class. Making sure that it's as similar as possible to the environment in which you would be presenting in person to your students. Also remember that this environment does leave electronic traces. So the important thing is to use those to your advantage. So depending on the product that you have, you might be able to track the amount of time that people are watching. You might be able to track when people can log in and out. For example, on Zoom, I can track the participants that are on, and I have that information available to me. So there are different ways that you can use the features in your online teaching tool or teaching environment to be able to track it and use that with respect to your advantage in monitoring your students' involvement in the course. The next one, I found this one to be interesting, is make sure to prepare your next course while you're teaching your current one. So as you're going through the teaching of your class, it's a good idea to teach. It's a good idea to teach from the standpoint of kind of figuring out what improvements you can make with each class, thinking about the content and how you may want to adapt the content. Be thinking about, as you're teaching a class, how you can use that opportunity to prepare for the next one. Last, I wanted to say is when it comes to instruction, make sure to take advantage of asynchronous time. Of course, this is the time that students kind of learn at their own pace, whether you're using video instruction or various assignments. Emphasize with students the importance of synchronous time. So when you do have synchronous time in your instruction where you are presenting and that your students are live in the environment with you, making sure to emphasize how important it is that students participate in that, as well as making sure that they're not only on, but that they're participating and involved. Make sure to ask good questions in your sessions. Ask questions that require students to think and that require students to be engaged and to respond. And then obviously, watching the student engagement is important. Kind of make sure that they're aware. And if you feel like your engagement needs improvement, take the opportunity as you move forward in your class and in your course to adjust for better participation from the students. And you can see there's the link to the information, and this link will be made available on the page in which we download this video, as well as on the Facebook page that this video is also available on. So what I want to do is open up the opportunity for people to offer suggestions and questions with respect to how they want to proceed in the discussion. You can post questions online using the chat feature in Zoom, and you should be able to access the chat feature from your screen. and you can type in your questions there, and then I will be happy to read them aloud to participants. If you would like to answer a question, all you have to do is unmute. Everybody's in mute right now, but you can choose to unmute. And of course, the key thing as we move forward with this discussion is not to make sure we're not speaking over each other, which is a common challenge with using these types of products. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them at this time, and we'll stay open for a while in case anybody else happens to join us.
Well, I'll start us off and just ask people that are participating, what experience do you have teaching budgeting and finance online?
Hi, this is Carla Flink, and no, this is my first time teaching online for this half a semester.
So do you have any particular concerns or questions, Carla, that things that you're like, okay, how do I do this, or something?
At this moment, I think I'm taking it a week at a time. I guess I have a couple weeks since you know a lot about state and local activities. Do you have suggestions for state and local kind of asynchronous activities that the students could do? And then we can talk about them in class. So for example, this coming week, we're talking about federal budget debt and deficit. And so we're doing the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget online debt fixer exercise to discuss that. And for state and local, we have the next couple of weeks of just discussing, and this is just intro to public budgeting. We usually do readings, and I have a couple of guest speakers come in, but do you have, I guess, better activities or something that might be a little bit more engaging for the online as opposed to the, I guess, just reading the textbook and then we talk about it in class?
Is this MPA or
this
undergrad?
is MPA and MPP.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And remind me, where are you?
I'm at American University.
Got it. So in my budgeting class, students have to review their local government budget using the GFOA Budget Presentation Award criteria.
Okay, great.
And so I tell them to, get a copy of the budget, whether it's where they live or where they work, and now the GFOA has made the Fishbein book on how to review a budget free. It's now a free download on the GFOA website, and you can get you can download the criteria, vote page, all that stuff is just downloadable under the GFOA Budget Presentation Awards website. And there's are you trying to meet synchronously or just asynchronously?
We're trying to meet synchronously for with blocks of less than 10 students. So I try to do 2 meetings per the block class time, where we just use it for more discussion and question and answer is what I'm hoping to do. So we meet for about an hour.
Got it. So the most all of the local budgets now are PDFs available online. Sometimes it's a web page, but usually they can just download a PDF. So are you using Blackboard, Zoom? What are you using for the?
I'm using Blackboard for right now.
Yeah, Blackboard Collaborate?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can turn over screen share to them, and so students can have their PDF of their budget up there. And so what my students do, I break this into 3 sessions. So the first session that we just did first week was the budget as a policy, document, and communications device. Those are kind of 2 sets of the 4 criteria. groups. And so I'm completely online this 8 weeks. And so I've had them actually use a program called VidGrid. And there are some others out there, Kaltura, and I think there's several. VidGrid supposedly is integrated into Blackboard, but if you look under the tools, you'll see it. But for students, it's only to view, at least here at NIU. So
Okay.
we had to actually have, but the institution has a Blackboard account. So what we had to do is have me and the students actually go to the vidgrid.com website, and then there's a login, user ID, and password. But then below that it's called enterprise login. So presumably, if you have Blackboard at American, then you and your students can just go in and log in through the enterprise login,
Okay.
and then they can actually create a video, and it's really, really easy. All you really do is bring up the program, and then it creates like a square that you can adjust to screen share, and then you click record, and then my students are saying things like, okay, so first criterion is the table of contents. So here's the table of contents, and you're looking at the budget, table of contents, and then they evaluate it based on what it's supposed to tell you, and so on. And then they just go through the criteria one by one, and then they save the video, and then they post it on the discussion forum for Blackboard.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And you could do it synchronously. In my seat version, I break them into groups of 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how many students in the class, and then they just share each of these with each other. I give them like a half an hour and say, okay, now evaluate the budget as a policy document, and they get to compare and contrast budgets that are crappy in policy and like they don't have any, and then the ones that are excellent, and so on, so that everybody gets a chance to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is the idea of posting it on the discussion forum, because now everybody can see each other's videos. So that's one exercise that's it can be very interactive, and you could be in the synchronous session guiding them through it with a budget, and then your students can be watching on, and then you can just ask, so is there anybody that wants to share their budget as a policy document? And someone raises their hand, and then you turn it over to them and say, okay, show us, and then they could just show you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. This week we're doing the budget as a financial plan. Next week as an operations guide. So there's like 3 different sessions.
Okay.
And thank you, Kirk, for that information about the Fishbein book. I'm glad to know that it's available for free, because
I think they just did that this year. Yeah.
Because it's one of those things I've been like, I probably should buy it to make sure that everything I'm doing is still right, and so I don't get the remarks on my evaluation, but certainly something to help out. And I'm going to write these down as they kind of come in, and hopefully we get some more that come in, but there were just 2 technical items I just wanted to mention. When you're using presentation slides, it's really best to try to use dark backgrounds. That's, of course, something that's not default in PowerPoint. The default in PowerPoint is to use a white or a light background, but the fact is that typically with the computer screens, it does show up better when you use a dark background. This is as much true with using it on a regular screen as it's true when you're doing your presentations on a projector. And then the other thing is, and this is just from my own experience, making sure to use a headset or an external, at the very least, an external microphone. The microphones inside laptops have gotten better, but it is surprising to me. I have seen a few classes where people are still just using their laptop microphones, and the reality is there's a lot of background noise that gets picked up. They're more omnidirectional, and as such, they have a tendency to pick up other things. Using an external microphone that can pick up, that's more unidirectional and picks up primarily from your voice is good, because that from your end reduces the amount of background noise that takes place in the audio feed.
I agree completely, Ken. And if you don't have a a nice headset, but they're only like $20. And our department provided every faculty member with a headset piece. But if you've just got your earbuds that has a mic, for when you plug into your phone and you're walking and talking or whatever, those also work much better than just using the built-in mic in the computer, because those mics are really designed to capture what's coming out about 4 inches away.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that.
So I guess I will jump in. This is Tatiana Guzman, and I have not maybe even a question, but a suggestion. Maybe we should do a joint folder on ABFM website where we could post. There is such an overflow of information now, but we all find interesting articles that we can use in the class, and I think it is interesting to use something that is very fresh, very common, very up to date now on coronavirus. So I personally found something on benefit cost analysis of coronavirus, or how states and cities will face budget shortfalls. So maybe we could have this folder, a hub to, where we could upload this information and share with our students in different classes. Situation changes so rapidly. So there are lots and lots of interesting reads that we could use in our classes.
We can certainly look at making it available as an upload folder. The challenge we have is some stuff with the website, but we will certainly take a look at that and see what we can do. Is there a way that you can use the group chat to send a link to that file, to where that article is?
Yes, I can definitely. I'm not saying it's the best articles, but we're studying benefit cost analysis next week, and I found that article on benefit cost of coronavirus. So I thought, okay, maybe that's something interesting for students to read. Absolutely. And I personally have, in the past I used more interesting, more on the point benefit cost articles, but now this one seems to be more up to date, and that's what everybody's talking about. But we all browse internet, we all read all this news. It would be really interesting to have this exchange of information that we could use in our classrooms.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'll send you the link right away.
Okay.
Yeah, Tatiana, that brings up the other idea, which is, Carla, that I also try and get my students to identify a current event for the topic of the week and post those on a discussion board and relate it to the readings and so on. And the coronavirus issue is a great example of Kingdon's agenda setting model with the garbage can model underlying, because when you looked at here's this crisis, etc., but here are all these people hopping on with some solutions. So if you looked at the early version of the $2 trillion Christmas tree, you could see that there was a list of things that Pelosi wanted to put into this bill. And there are a whole bunch of things. I think the Center on Policy Priorities made that list of like, okay, these do not belong on this emergency bill. But, they wanted the Republicans to pass some of those things. So they're trying to stick them into this crisis bill. I think they got weeded out. But it's a perfect example of trying to, take advantage of a problem, and here's some solutions that can also fit this problem, but they're for other problems in general. I mean, it was just a perfect example of the garbage can agenda setting process.
Great, thanks. So definitely students were having questions about the funding stimulus package. So definitely trying to put together some reading resources and having a conversation on that now that hopefully we have a little bit more clarity in what it includes or not.
Yeah, I've been just to let you know, I've been talking with a person that we have in Washington that represents us, and it's been interesting because obviously for us it's the matter of stabilization funding, and at the municipal level, and it's really interesting how that has been constructed from the standpoint that cities with populations of over 500,000 will be able to request their stabilization funding directly from the federal government. At least that's the way that we understand it now. For those smaller jurisdictions under 500,000, and obviously that does not just include small jurisdictions, but it also includes a lot of large jurisdictions, you're basically having to go through the states. And the way the money is being distributed to the states, it's being distributed on a base plus formula approach. Whatever these large cities get from the federal government actually gets deducted from that state total. In North Carolina, we only have one city that'll qualify as a city over 500,000, and that's Charlotte. Surprisingly, Raleigh is at least the last time we looked, Raleigh is not as a city at over 500,000. Wake County's over 1 million, but Raleigh proper is not over 500,000. At least that's what we think. And so it's been really interesting to see how they've structured this stabilization allocation that is obviously a concern for us, because we know that we're expecting to see significant reductions in revenue in the very near immediate future.
You know, Ken, I had already planned back in last semester when I was planning this online-only course that I'm teaching now in budgeting, that it was time to start teaching students about cutback budgeting, because it was inevitable that we were going to get a recession. Didn't have any way of knowing it would be triggered by, a unprecedented global pandemic, et cetera. But I was just on the phone. So on this topic, I put in a whole section of readings on cutback budgeting. And it's going to be associated with using Balancing Act, which I don't know if you guys went to the session at ABFM where we talked about using Balancing Act as a teaching tool. But it's now available to faculty to use. You have to get a teaching account and so on. But we're creating a cutback scenario for a local budget. It's based really on Dubuque, Iowa, and which is I think it's the city of 50,000 in any town in the templates that are available in Balancing Act. In any case, I call it River City, but it was quite prescient actually, because I was on the phone last night with the CFO for Dubuque, and they are now estimating just for the rest of the fiscal year, which is through June 30th, that they're going to lose $2.1 million in sales tax revenue. They're going to lose a huge chunk of their tourism tax, hotel motel tax, and if all this is discouraged through June and July, which seems to be likely, at least many parts of the country, they could lose even more. But $2 million hit to a local government budget, that's a lot of money. So how do students respond to those issues? So maybe one current event issue, if you don't have cutback budgeting in your course, now would be a good time to start educating students about how they have to think about this. And there are some classic articles that have been out there, and some more recently that are looking at cutback management, cutback budgeting. But we have a whole bunch of managers and CFOs, who've become managers and CFOs in the last 12 years, and they don't really have a clue about what cutback budgeting really is like. So at least to manage it from the top. So it's something that students might really benefit from.
I 100% agree, and in fact, that's currently something that I'm going through right now here from a practitioner end. It would be helpful, Kurt, if you could email me that article list so that we can add it. I imagine some of it will be available. Will have to be behind the wall, but Certainly, if you can just email me that list, that would be helpful so that we can share it on the website.
I
Something
also
else.
just messaged to everyone a link to a cutback management report that I've used in my classes before.
Okay,
That's
yeah, I
free.
see it.
That's a pretty nice one too. That's also not behind a paywall.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and if I can ask Kurt, if you could share the link for Fishbrain review book, because I'm looking online, I don't find it. Maybe I should
Yeah,
spend more time, but
I'll tell you what, let's look
Right.
it up together real quick. So you should see Google now on your screen or here very soon.
Let me see if this will work. I'm cutting and pasting from Blackboard. So, so these are my lists, and I assume that if you plug them into Google Scholar, you should be able to pull up the document, the documents to download and post in your Blackboard. But these are the ones that I chose to use for this this term.
Okay.
McFarland and Pagano is National League of Cities, so that's easy to get, and that's fiscal conditions in 2019. What's interesting, of course, is cities were in pretty good shape in 2019, but now they're not going to be in good shape. And it, also next week, Wednesday at noon, there's going to be a GFOA webinar, and Chris Adams, who's one of the partners at Balancing Act, and I are going to be part of that for about 10-15 minutes, and I'll be talking to we expect about 100 CFOs from around the country, but it's a GFOA webinar, so you have to pay, but it's going to be recorded, so hopefully we can make that available later. But I'm going to talk about this case that we're doing for cutback budgeting, and I'm just going to talk about the two big principles that CFOs need to kind of think about is the strategic plans are made for cutback moments, so protect your priorities, and the second, and not do across the board, and then the second is that this is what rainy day funds and fund balances are for, is to be able to do that. So hopefully we'll have that available too.
Sounds good.
Did you just put in Fishbine into the?
Yeah, let me try it again.
Because it's yeah. Usually that gets it really fast. Keep going. Here, let me just I'll just get it out of my Blackboard course.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll just kind of paste these one at a time. Here's the link for the budget awards criteria. Here's the vote page. Oh, it's doing the web courses version.
Yeah,
I don't know if that'll come out.
doesn't look like it will.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right, let me try something else here. Well, this seems like an overly long.
Hello? Kurt, if it's when you get an opportunity, how about you could just email me the link and I'll make sure it gets onto the page that we set up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And I see that we had somebody just join us, but we're just about done. Were there any other questions that anybody wanted to ask? Anything that anybody wanted to share as a concern or as something that they're doing with respect to teaching finance and budgeting online? Okay, well, seeing none, I just want to thank everybody. And you should see where I've written up the contributions that we have received, and there's certainly a lot. Thank you to everybody who participated. Kurt, thank you so much for your advice and guidance throughout the process, and also to Tatiana as well. And certainly I see that she sent something else, just sent a link in there about something from Committee for Responsible Budgeting on, what's it called,
Yes,
Debt Fixer?
Right. That is their free online activity for achieving a more balanced federal budget, or close to balanced federal budget.
Right.
And so that might be a good online activity for students to complete as well.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for tuning in, and hopefully this is of help to all of you. And thank you very much, and we'll see if we need to do something like this in the future, and if we do, we will. But until then, thank you so much for your participation. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.